Good evening. Welcome to the Planning Board meeting, Monday, October 10th. Roll call, please.
Marilyn Harris.
Here.
William Greenrose.
Yep.
David Putnam.
Yes.
Richard Warlick.
Here.
Bruce Kalenda.
Here.
James Short.
Here.
Marlene Jordan.
Here.
Charlene Lovett.
Here.
Victor Bergeron.
Here.
Neil Ward. Nick Kolosky.
All right. With that, we'll move on to a review of minutes for September 26th. Do we have any discussion on that?
We have like 2 minutes to read them because I didn't have it in my pack. I think it was just on the table, right?
They were just delivered on the table.
Yes,
a little late.
yes. So can I just have 2 minutes?
Sure.
Mike, we've gone through this once before, I know, but what's the policy or what is the protocol for people who weren't at that meeting? Should they abstain or should they?
We have enough people who can stay.
Okay. Because we've run into that in the past where you need the quorum.
Yeah.
I mean, would folks be more comfortable waiting until the next meeting to,
No, I'm good.
I'm good.
all right, then I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion, we accept the minutes from September 26th.
I second the motion.
All right, any discussion with that? No? All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, in the minutes,
And I'll abstain.
okay. It still passes. All right, and with that, we'll move on. Okay, so we're at old business, and this is PB 2016-00016. Fairhand, and I'm going to mispronounce it again. How is that? Okay, Yaku. Claremont, New Hampshire. The applicant is seeking a special use permit to convert an existing two-family home to a three-family home. Property location 154-156 North Street, tax map 107, lot 280, zone district PR, continued from September 26, 2016. So what do we got here, Mike?
Okay, well, as you can see, I thought the easiest route of sharing information was to provide you a copy of what was provided to the zoning board. So you had that in your packets delivered to you. So in my memo to the planning board, just gave you a quick review of the zoning board status, that they have continued to their meeting in November, but they've also opted for a site visit to review the property and take a look at things for their density case. But just so you folks are up on the information that I provided, we could talk about the continuance and the site visit in a minute. The September 29th memo to the zoning board, that is a discussion of the lot density requirements, and as you know, that's the critical point of the zoning board variance, is the permissible density is 2 units. The applicant's seeking a 3rd unit, which is higher density than allowed by zoning ordinance. So he's seeking a variance for that. At the same time, because of the way the zoning ordinance is written, any conversion from a duplex to a multifamily, so 2 to 3 units, requires a special use permit. That's why you're reviewing it. I think some of the information in here is helpful to give you context on the overall site, but also the size of the individual units. There's one bedroom and two-bedroom units. And on the first page of the zoning memo, I based on the floor plans, I calculated square footage, and they meet the minimum requirements set out in the zoning ordinance for the PR zoning district. So, aside from the lot density, the strict numbers of the case seem to comport with the zoning ordinance. The other information just reviews the 5 criteria, but then on top of that, what I did was I did share the material shared by the applicant, which is some photos of the site, as well as the layout for the 3 units. So units 1, 2, 3 are labeled. And technically for the variance application, the permission is to add that 3rd unit, unit number 3. I don't know how that will play into your case, but once it goes through zoning, it's really a minor detail for the planning board. And then, let's see here. Just to give some context in terms of the history of the case, I shared communication correspondence not only with the current owner, but also the prior owner, to demonstrate how this case has been evolving over the last year or so. So the current owner, Mr. Yakub, he purchased the property just this year, earlier this year, but I don't know, what, 6 months ago?
3 months,
4 months. So in this case, the intent was the applicant understood that a variance was needed, and he's essentially trying to get the permission to do it. I guess to provide those earlier communications was more to give you context that there's no intent on the applicant to, I don't know, hornswoggle the city. I don't even know if that's a right slang from the Old West. Maybe you know better, Bill.
I wasn't around now.
No. Tarnation. So that's it right there in a nutshell. Just so you know, the fact that the zoning board has continued the case doesn't prevent you from commencing your discussions. You could, if you reviewed the case, issue a conditional approval. I have not gotten to the extent of recommending any conditions, but the conditional approval could be the variance be obtained from the zoning board. Could even now hear the case and discuss likely conditions, and I could take those notes with me, develop the conditions for the next hearing. However you want to do it, or continue it. And as I informed the ZBA, I was planning to invite you folks to come to the site visit if you so wanted. We haven't set a date, but it would be next week. So, seeing that zoning board is first up, I'm going to defer to them in terms of timing. But if I get a consensus that there will be a number of planning board members willing to attend, I would post notice for both boards rather than just the zoning board.
So it's been our typical position not to decide on any case until it's gone through the zoning board.
Okay.
I don't know how the board feels about that.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I would like to continue that process.
Okay. I do know that we would probably, if there's gonna be a site visit, I'd be interested.
Mhm.
I would as
I
well.
plan, I would
Yes.
like to go.
So there's a likelihood of a quorum attending that site visit.
Mhm.
Okay.
Mhm.
Another question.
Yep.
Is it reasonable for us to ask for a site plan so that we can see how parking for the additional apartment will be covered, off-street parking?
Mhm. It's your prerogative, whether that's something you'd like to see. I think the best approximation and you know, in discussions with the applicant, a case like this, an existing site, I suggested at the very least provide an aerial photo.
Mhm.
If the planning board wanted to see something more, that's certainly up to you to request it.
I don't think the aerial photo defines or provides us with the information that we need so that we can really see how, according to city codes, how many cars are allowed for each apartment, where they're going to be placed on the lot. The aerial photo is not providing that for us, so I would ask for a site plan. Is that reasonable, Mr. Chair?
Well, depends how we defining a site plan. Is that, are we saying he would have to get it surveyed, or what are we saying with that?
Well, that's a fair question. Special use permit doesn't require a surveyed site plan.
Okay,
Um,
but if we could have
But a
just a
site-
drawing.
Right, a site sketch with dimensions
Yep.
or
That's correct.
details on it that are a little more detailed than this.
Well, I'm not expecting the expense of going to a surveyor and laying it out like new construction, but if we could just have a drawing to scale that shows where the cars are going to be parked, for how many cars are allowed for each apartment. Right now, the aerial photo does not show that.
Right, dumpster location,
That's correct.
snow storage.
Plus, there would be a likelihood of, that would be one of the conditions to approve the special permit if the board were to go that way.
Mhm.
Because I know I've driven by several times and the cars are parked on the grass, they're not in the driveway.
Yeah, I've seen that myself.
And so, one thing that I would want to see is understanding that there's lawn there and cars can be parked on the grass, but it's still not defining an allocated assignment for where cars are going to be parked for each tenant, and taking to allowance snow plowing.
Mike, what is the requirement for a three-unit?
I'm trying to do the math right now.
Requirement.
It's 1.5 cars per.
It's
per
5 units, it's
apartment.
5 parking spaces.
Yep.
5 spaces. And are they defined as unobstructed? In other words, are they 5 places for, that anyone can get in and out of, or can they be in a series in a driveway?
I've seen residential, sort of multifamily residential layouts where they're parked end to end. You know, nose in a driveway in a
Mhm.
series, like you say.
Just people have to jockey them if they need.
Right.
Okay, but that's allowed.
That's been approved in the past.
Okay, thanks. Just appreciate that.
Is parking on lawns approved?
No.
They're discouraged. We try to avoid that at all costs. Not only parking, but also things like placement of dumpsters in front lawns. We see that in some properties, and we try to avoid that when we can.
You know, if we want to beautify the city, we've got to start sticking to some consistent expectations. And so where dumpsters are placed and how the property is maintained with lawn and assigned spots for cars. Otherwise, we're just going to look like a town, continue to look like a town of rundown tenements. We're trying to move away from that.
Mike, I'd like to see in the drawing also, placement of permanent lighting for safety of the people living there.
Okay, so
Like,
whatever might be for the
Right.
driveway?
Right, so people can see the other vehicles, like Stephen to come out and go home after work, when it's dark. It's gonna be very dangerous trying to get from your car to your house if it was no lighting.
Well, depending on the time of day that we're able to convene for the site visit, you might be able to see that firsthand.
Okay.
So in regards to parking, I know when we look at commercial properties, especially new permits, we want to know what the access is for fire safety and emergency vehicles. In regards to tenements, if cars are allowed to park willy-nilly and without an assigned area for cars, it's not leaving any access for emergency vehicles, i.e. a fire truck. So how is that identified in our regulations and codes?
The Fire Protection Code, the NFPA 1, Chapter 18, talks about fire access. And there is a provision in there that allows for existing buildings and existing access. So, for example, the NFPA is not going to say, well, this existed prior to our regulations. You have to put a 20-foot wide access around the building. That's just impractical. So they do defer to the local official, which is the fire chief or his captain. So whatever is needed for these 3 units to make them compliant with the life safety codes would be done. I think more interior than on the site.
Yep.
So that's usually with this type of situation, that's how it's dealt with. It's more at the building side rather than the external circulation.
So one place I'm coming from with this, when you look at the square footage for each apartment, these are small places. So the population density in that building is going to be pretty high compared to a single family living in that same house. And that's a concern for me when it comes to not having access for safety equipment if they have to get there quickly because of how many people are living in that building. 3 separate families, 3 separate homes.
Anybody else?
Mike, I see there's parking on both sides of this building.
Yes.
It's basically a single driveway on each side.
Yeah, it seems like the driveway on the Unit 2 side is wide enough for 2 vehicles, but we can get more information with that sketch, site sketch.
So with that, what does the board feel they want to, do we want to continue this? And if we do, you're saying the ZBA is continuing until when?
November 7th.
So,
We won't meet to the 14th.
14th or,
Monday, November 14th.
Yep.
Can we make a motion?
I'll make a motion that we continue this until November 14th.
I'll second it.
okay, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we're going to continue until November
I'd just like
14th.
to make a comment.
Sure.
Why isn't all this stuff given to us at the very beginning when we first discussed this whole thing? When we did it up to the community center?
That's one of the problems that we had at the community center.
Yeah. But now we're getting this, and was that known at the time the community center was there? I mean, when we had the meeting, was that on the file and nobody found it? Is that what the issue is?
No,
Provided.
this information was provided after that meeting.
No, but the stuff, you had to look up some of the information here about the past stop work order and stuff.
Right, that was information that was in the file. We haven't typically provided that information in the past. We can in future cases. I thought it was helpful to provide both boards with context on this particular property.
I appreciate that, because I think it provides us some information outside of this particular scenario that may help us improve processes and policies.
Hmm.
So I think it's very important to get the full background. I want to have one question, Mr. Chair. You had said that this current owner bought the property knowing that the previous condition of it possibly being 3 apartments was not, that he would need to go before the boards for zoning and special permit use, correct?
Yeah, should I give the full story, or do you want to save that for later?
You go ahead, I said it last time.
Okay.
You know that.
Yeah. So the full story is that at the time of the purchase of the property, Mr. Yakub was purchasing it from the prior owner, and the prior owner at the time of the sale claimed that he had submitted an application for a variance. After this closing was complete, Mr. Yakub came into the office to follow up on the variance application, saying everything's okay, right? And we had no record of any application being filed.
So I would like to take this opportunity, because Mr. Yakub has been, this is the second time, because he went to the community center once and now here. I would like to say I appreciate you trying to make this right, because what happened previously is not a good thing, as we all can see. So I appreciate his efforts to at least bring it into compliance.
We didn't include it in the motion, right? We want to see parking spots on the 14th.
Yeah, that was part of, that was not part of the motion, but that was part of the request for more information.
Okay.
Motion to continue was just to set a date for them.
Anything else? No? All right, well, let's move on. Sorry about that, but
Thank you.
we're going to go do a follow-up on work session for site plan regulations.
Before we go on, can I?
Yep.
I want the owner to leave for a minute. Is this in a situation like Manchester and the big cities had a while back, where every time they got to a certain point of enforcing rules, they sold it to somebody else and started the whole thing over again?
I wasn't aware of that, and
Did that, Manchester had that problem for quite a while. They had to put a stop to it, because what would happen, when they started enforcing code regulations, they would just sell it to somebody else.
Yeah.
And they had to start all over again.
I would think that it would be easily to sue them for not a full disclosure.
But that wasn't done. They just had to change what they were doing and find out. This is a case where somebody bought a place, said everything's okay, but in fact, it was in the file that there was violations, and he didn't even know that.
So how would
And
you
so-
change that?
Huh?
How would you change that to make the person aware that there is a problem?
Well,
And take this case, for instance.
I'm not saying he was involved in that kind of a stint, but that's what Manchester went through, and it was pretty drastic for a while. And I'm not saying this is what took place. I'm just saying, is that possibly happening?
What
with-
did they do?
How do they do, what do they do to solve it?
I'm not sure.
But can I ask a question? So, in June, the city issued cease and desist order to stop the electrical work and plumbing that was being done without permits.
But that was to the prior owner.
I know that. Let me finish, please.
Yep.
So the question is, wouldn't that somehow, from planning development's perspective, flag that property? Is there some way you could tie a flag like that in with, that owner trying to sell it then at some point?
well, I don't know if I communicated this clearly enough. We were in full communication with the prospective buyer prior to him closing. And the email that I sent to him, I'm not sure I included my cover email, but I forwarded so So that was August, okay. No, so the August email I sent to you, but in the, he came in, Mr. Yakub came into our office a number of times prior to purchasing the property. And we were fully upfront with all the barriers and hangups that we had about this particular property. And he received assurances from the seller that they'd be resolved. And then they were not. And now he was left holding the bag.
Right, so he was given,
False assurance.
right.
So in terms of that, I think the city did a good effort in trying to educate and share the relevant information to the buyer. And the buyer thought he was walking into the deal prepared.
He knew that there was a stop work order on the property?
Yeah.
I also think that the, I'm sorry.
Just curious, do we know if that was in writing, or was that something that the seller verbally conveyed to him? It just sounds like he doesn't have any recourse. You were saying sue the guy. If it was a verbal, he doesn't have any evidence other than, what he said he heard, as opposed to having something in his documentation that said these things were resolved. Just thinking from his perspective.
Right, yeah, there was no, I don't believe there's, we're not here to talk about civil litigation, but.
No, and well, thinking about whose responsibility is it? I mean, if you're buying a property, you would think you'd want to go into the town and check the records to see if everything was on the up and up, with the property was clear.
Right.
Now, the challenge is, if somebody hands you a piece of paper that says zoning variance application, and you're not familiar with that process,
Sure.
Yeah.
you might take that at face value.
Yep.
And that is my understanding what happened.
Yeah.
I know now, thanks to DeForest's work, that I look for a tracking number, I look for a date received, I look for sign off. Then I know, and that's all that stuff that I didn't see in the paper that he showed me. So, and then we went up to DeForest to say, is this in here? And she said no, and we trust DeForest. And we double checked and triple checked, and it wasn't there.
Wow.
So in this case, then the previous owner had a cease and desist order from planning and development and the code enforcement officer specifically. Then what's the next step? I mean, from the city side, as far as, okay, you've got your cease and, how does the city go about making it right?
That's fair. Well, that's right. So the April 11th letter that I wrote to the prior owner outlined how to make it right, and specifically a variance and a special use permit. Then, once those are in line, then he can continue with the building permits that are required for plumbing, electrical, and any renovations
Right.
to the building.
But in this case.
Which were not obtained. And I think, it's, there are certain ways that the building inspectors can tell. If somebody claims, oh, that's always been there, I'd never touched that before, the building inspector has ways to tell when things were built. And so it was clear, it was very evident that this work had proceeded illegally, which prompted the cease and desist.
Correct.
And if work continued after that, then fines would be levied.
But in this case.
Work ceased, and
Work
the unit
ceased.
and the unit remains unoccupied now,
Right, but then the property was sold.
and the property was sold.
They didn't heed
So I
the
guess
CFO.
ultimately the question is,
Never did.
is there is there something that the city can do differently to kind of bring this issue to a conclusion before it transfers hands?
I'm a little uncomfortable with that circumstance, simply because the city has done within its powers to stop the occupancy of an illegal unit. And then sort of a private sale between two parties. I don't know, Marlene, if you have any thoughts. I'm not quite sure the city can intervene and stop that
I don't think we can
sale.
intervene on something like
It's up to the buyer to investigate.
Anyone can sell at any
Yeah.
time they
Private
want.
sale it
I
is.
don't think we
That's right.
should be getting involved in
It's up to the buyer to investigate.
I agree.
Buyer beware.
Yep.
I mean, in certain extreme cases, I'm sure the city could place a lien on the property for certain expenses incurred. But
'Cause the
again,
position-
that's up to the buyer whether or not they want to assume that risk. So,
See, the problem here is you don't have no idea it's a private sale going on anyway, so you
Right.
can't get.
It's a private sale,
intervene
definitionally.
with it anyway.
Yeah, it
That-
wasn't
that's a
listed.
fair statement.
You have no idea until it's sold.
right. I mean, we have a number of cases. I think the responsible property owners that I can think of in the last, say, year or so, they check on the property before the sale. And they make sure everything's in line. And, you know, this happened with a 9-unit multifamily out in the neighborhoods over there. And we went through an extensive zoning review process to make sure that was an existing non-conforming building. And once he had all of that straightened out, then he went forward with the purchase. You know, it's all up to the individual's desired level of risk.
My question is, if the old owners had the permits and stuff, and he sells the property, does it transfer to the new owner
Yes.
automatically? Okay.
So,
So if there weren't any permits transferred to the new owner, then that would have been a flag right there if he was aware that there were actually permits.
And he stuff's one in the bag.
Well, right, we'd be able to pull the permits and say, you have a building permit for this property that expires in X.
This is when you found out about it, when he applied for building permits?
He came in after the sale to say, okay, I'm ready to go, I understand it has a variance already. And we said, no.
Unfortunately, he's stuck with this one.
Yeah.
That's right, and he's trying to ride it through.
but see, this is the dilemma. I can't
That's
speak for the board that I find myself in. So here's an individual who's trying to do the right thing.
Mhm.
However, it is contradictory to what I believe is stated in the master plan as far as what our vision is for the downtown area. And when you start changing density, it does impact a lot of things. I mean, parking space plans are based on densities, and it says in the master plan that, you know, our percentage of rental units is above that of the state average. So we talk about all of the challenges that surround areas of the community where there's a high density of rental units. And here, this is a request coming before this board for special permit use to increase the number of units in this property from 2 to 3. So I find that to be an awkward position to be in.
And quite an interesting challenge too, from the city's perspective, because it's already tight parking space. We have 2 driveways, and you try to increase the density to another unit. It just makes it more challenging to get parking space where there isn't none.
Mr. Greenrose?
Sure. I hear your point. I went back, I was looking at the notes you sent, Mike, around the existing densities on that street. Did you see some of the numbers on that? I mean, 1,252 on an 8-unit, 1,743 on a 4-unit. So there are already a number of buildings on that street that are way below that minimum threshold. So
I understand that.
I think
My
if we can.
concern, I'm sorry.
No. I just say if we can address the issues of parking and, appearance, I don't know if he should be penalized if we can address those issues, because there have been obviously many exceptions.
Sure, and when the city center project did its street survey in the city center, that was, part of the survey work was to identify by how many cars, how many light meters there were on a building.
Yeah, I remember.
Yep.
I walk those streets doing
Sure.
that.
And our discoveries were incredible to see the actual densities in some of these buildings. You know, some of these people must be living in 600 square feet, for crying out loud.
That's becoming a common theme, though,
Sure.
a small unit.
But in response to what you said, Mr. Greenrose, when do we stop? As we move forward, what are we trying to achieve? It would lead us to believe in the master plan that we are trying to promote efforts that create attractive, affordable housing, but not necessarily do it in a way that continues to increase the density, because it comes with another whole issue of challenges. And at some point in time, we have to say, what's been done in the past is in the past. It's grandfathered in. We can't continue to do this. But moving forward, what are we going to do? What makes this individual case so difficult is that I think, some things weren't necessarily understood very well by the current property owner, and now he's trying to do something right that was not done right in the past. So that's a difficult situation to be in, because you want to award the behavior that tries to do things by current ordinance, and at the same time, you don't want to exasperate an existing problem, which is in some areas of the city, we have too many rental units. It's not a good thing.
Myself, I tend to think back to Bernie's.
I was just thinking of that
Yeah.
when we did that and denied it. Yeah.
Right,
This
because,
is joint meeting too, wasn't it, with the zone? Was that the last one we did?
That was the
No.
last joint meeting.
That was, yeah, I remember that.
right,
It was their decision, not our, that was their conditions,
Right.
not our conditions. Yeah.
and if I remember correctly, I mean, it was, just looking at it, you could tell there wasn't enough parking. There wasn't enough storage for snow. It just didn't work. So, I mean, I personally wouldn't have any problems. I mean, I appreciate this gentleman trying to make it right, but point is that I have a hard time seeing 3 units. If it's existing, it's existing, but to allow it, I don't see that as a good thing. And I do see it kind of going against the master plan a little bit.
I agree. I don't see 3 units here. Looking at it, I don't really see 2, if you really want to know. But there are 2.
I'd say considering we continued the case, maybe a case-specific
Right.
discussion should.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Sorry, Bruce.
when we are, can I make a request that if the zoning board grants a variance, could we have in our packet the notes from that, so we can read how they came to the decision?
Yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll probably make personal notes, because the minutes will very likely not be ready by then.
Okay. I mean, I think in this case, that's important for us to see. Just like this history here is really helpful.
I think the problem is, the trend's been in Claremont for a long time, and Dave's been around a long time.
Thanks for that.
For landlords to come in, buy a building and add to it instead of building a new one. They've turned nice houses into 2 or 3 apartments, and it's been done, Shannon's right, it's been done for a long time, and now we're having issues.
That's right.
And no matter where you go, you'll see people parking on the grass or on the sidewalk. And how we control that is becoming an issue. And eventually, we're gonna have to start to control it, or you're gonna have some issues.
We try to as best we can. There are design guidelines, and there are certain requirements in certain districts. But really, the meat of where we can get to that is under conditions of approval for our site plan. Like you say, though, properties pass from hand to hand, and the site is maintained one way or another, and we find out as the violation is happening,
Yeah.
what's going on. And somebody might wait 6 months or a year before they complain. So, we don't patrol the streets.
No.
but we do respond to complaints. And that's,
Okay.
until we have more capacity to do, have drones flying around maybe.
Speaking
I have
of,
one.
would there be any,
Nice, all right.
did you bring it?
No, but I could.
Would there,
See how excited he was? You got a toy?
is
Planning
there
board has
any
a
way
drone.
you
Wow.
could require the real estate agencies to
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thinking
research
about
a
that.
property
Yeah.
before they list it or put it on the market? To go to the city and research?
I think
Or-
Marlene wants to answer that question.
A
Hey,
variation on that would be to work with all the real estate agencies in the area to have some sort of buyer guidelines for these sorts of things, to at
That-
least say, you need, make sure you, like you said.
That was my first
That-
thought, but
But then I'm thinking about this case, it wouldn't have helped, it was a private sale. Wouldn't help this guy, but it
No.
might help others.
Yep.
I think it's a
Yep,
great
can't talk
idea
about
to
this
get
one.
them, to help be part of the solution. It may not be
Oh, I agree.
perfect, but if they came up with a hit list of things to look for, well, not a, yeah, poor choice of words from the guy from Jersey, but.
no,
point
we understand.
being, it could be helpful.
The real estate board has their own rules and regulations. I mean, we can't really impose rules on them. That has to come from them. I mean, we can have meetings with them and make suggestions.
That's.
But I mean, as far as requiring them to do anything, that's not our purview.
But,
And you
but do
are-
we have, I'm sorry.
And you are busy enough, aren't you?
Me? No, I need some more.
No, but isn't that, not that it has to be a requirement, but the whole philosophy in all of these, in the literature that I'm reading about successful communities, it's all about building partnerships.
Right, I
So
mean,
that
yeah.
we don't miss the opportunities.
I mean, we can ask to get together and have discussions and suggestions and get their feedback as well as to how we can work together.
Right, because as
We just
Mr.
have to reach out and try it. But I can say that realtors very seldom come into my office for information.
So just for full disclosure, Nancy Merrill, the Director of Planning Development, is a licensed real estate realtor, and she does have those connections. She knows how to talk the talk, has access to MLS and all these things. So we do have some familiarity in the office with certain protocols and requirements. The due diligence is, again, as we've been saying, due diligence is on the individual. And the accuracy of a listing may, for whatever reason, may not be right on. We've seen residential properties listed as commercial. And, somebody, and so whenever we see an error or an issue with a listed property, we do notify the realtor of that issue. Just like, I think, talking about partnerships, that's one way. We know a fair number of them, and Nancy's on the phone with a few of them a week. But then with Marlene, our office and the fire department and a couple other departments, we freely communicate in the city, and we try to push that as much as we can to check up on each other for different properties and different issues that might arise. Just today I emailed Marlene, I have this thing with this property, can you help me check it out? We found in the past that wasn't necessarily the case,
But we're trying
before
to-
our time, but we're
But
trying
we're
as
trying
best we
to
can.
make
to follow.
improvements all the time, working together, multiple departments, because we all look at a property in a different way.
Right.
Fire departments, health and safety, building permits and zoning regulations, and I look at it from a perspective of what features the property has and put a value on it accordingly. And so we all have our differences, but yet we work together to make the property a better property.
And then we try to, as best we can, extend that beyond the city to those other organizations around.
I find that odd, because I bought my house, which was quite a while ago. Before I could even realtor told me, if you want to buy this, you're going to have to get a variance from the zoning board, even though there was one. Because transferring ownership, that's what it was told back then, 30-some odd years ago. Because it's a non-conforming lot. House is already built, but I had to go before the zoning board and get another variance, and I could rebuild it on the same platform if something disastrous happened to it. And that permit's on file, and I have a copy of it. But I think some realtors do look at certain things, maybe not going up to see if there's any permits issued for certain things, but they do look at certain issues, most of them do.
Yeah, the more responsible ones.
But I understand getting a partnership is probably a good idea,
Mm-hmm.
because they see stuff that sometimes you don't see.
Hi.
Can you raise your right hand?
I too have empathy for this gentleman. And I love all the suggestions for partnering for a better community. But in the end, as a board, we're going to look at the merits of the case, look at the master plan, and then make a decision, because we're all about change right now. And the fact that there's a huge density on North Street, those were the decisions of the past. And moving forward, we want to improve on those because we want to improve our city. So I truly believe that, you know, if he comes forward and we can find a place for the dumpster and the snow and the parking within the guidelines of the master plan, then fine. But I too was a realtor for a short period of time, and one of the first things you learn is buyer beware. So all of these things that we can do to improve the city are great, but this was a private sale. In this case, they probably would not have helped. And it really is the onus of the buyer to ensure that what he's being told is accurate. That's just my feeling. It's a tough decision.
All right, so with that, shall we move on?
Yo, sure.
Okay. So Mike, it goes
Okay.
to you for,
Yes. So, gave you some homework, and I personally, you know, I've had some grammatical changes right now to the working draft of the site plan amendment. And I believe, does everybody have a copy of the working draft?
Kids, I left it at home.
Would you like a spare copy? Okay.
I'll get your homework.
No, I just grabbed stuff, I was late, and I grabbed stuff and I missed that. Apologize for that. It's been a busy day.
Okay.
Don't have any
I'm going to need
copies?
to make a photocopy or two. James, you too?
Yeah.
Anybody else? Talk amongst yourselves. Be all right.
Blah, 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 blah.
Present buyer, not present owner, is actually a tenant of the present owner.
Thought I had it. Guess I don't.
There, business associates. There is no relationship. And I don't know if
Well, we're talking among myself, anybody going down to the conference in
the
November?
prior owner sold it to him thinking that
Guess
he
not.
could get
I
carried.
You can't do that
Then
kind of.
maybe.
in November, is that when,
16th and 17th, the National, New Hampshire Municipal Association.
Where's it gonna be?
I'm not saying that that's.
The Radisson in Manchester.
There is a relationship between them.
it's when they have it annually?
Yeah.
Right, yeah, I'll probably be going.
I don't know, I just,
What is it? The registration
What's that
is,
I mean, he's trying to make it right.
can't remember what it is. It's $100
We'll
for
have to
2
make a
days.
decision and put a stop to it at some point.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. So, um, with the documents that you have, like I said before, it is a working draft. It is intended to be something that can be changed. This is the review process. I thought I'd get you involved earlier than later, so that if there are any questions or concerns about how it's developed. The memo that I gave to you dated September 19th, so it gives a quick overview of how it addresses 3 specific conditions of site development, with no review, minor review, and major review. I think we had a fairly extensive discussion last meeting about the minor review process, and I think there needs to be some refining in the markup regulations with regard to process and submittals. But I'm open for any questions if you have any, or discussion points.
Just looking through it quickly, and I missed the last meeting, so I had to come in cold on it. Is there any reference in here to, I didn't see it, it just could be I missed it, snow removal or patterning or locations for snow storage for larger, or like we were just talking about, this congested space? What are they going to do?
Right, and I think that's actually,
Or is it covered under a
so
sub-element?
under that specific situation, I did make a note to myself to cross-reference special use permits, because the zoning ordinance talks about special use permits, but the site plan regulations do not. So I think I should cross-reference that into the site plan regulations. But for the special use permit, there is a part 10 or something like that in the special use review criteria says other conditions as deemed necessary.
And that's in here as well, that the planning board can assign additional. I just
Yeah.
want to make that a formal that we always look for. Or
yeah, I'm
traffic
just-
patterns, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I'm looking at the major site plan requirements, and I don't believe there's a substantial change, but it does talk about landscaping, layout, utilities, lighting.
Yeah, saw that.
Retaining walls, fences outside storage. I'll make a note for snow storage. I might make it one of these in the list of areas, location of.
I think trash is in there, but I didn't see it.
Yep.
And my other question was, we talked at an earlier meeting about an escalation plan or a follow-up plan, where when things are required, examples you've talked about in the past, places on Washington Street, they're, not adhering to the letter of what their agreement, of the plan. Would that be relevant to have that methodology mapped out in here, or is that for somewhere else?
I would put that in the rules of procedure.
Perfect, okay, thanks.
So we'll get to those sort of
Okay.
in the near
Great.
future. I don't think next. We have some zoning amendments to talk about next.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Short?
Yeah, talk about density, increase the density on North Street. We have a lot of land in the city that is sellable and usable. Is there any discussion, any of the boards or committees or even the city council about marketing the city in such a way that people build new houses, start expanding out a little bit more to ease the density requirements on the inner part of the city?
There is, I'd have to say, we do have inquiries once in a while for new construction, and we do have some permits in for new construction. The way the city might market that, I think the city does a fairly robust marketing effort in the first place. But Designated tracts of land, I think that's through the zoning, but not necessarily part of the site plan regulations themselves.
Okay.
And, yeah, I think new construction, no matter how much you try to prepare for it in regulations, it's really a market-driven factor, unless the city wants to get into the business of developing housing.
Oh, the city wants to do that.
No, Mr. Putnam.
So a little more response to your comment, Mr. Short, is during the city center project, we did identify in the city center under the category of infill pieces of property that were available for infill. And one of the discussions had, because all the city services have direct access to all the city center, trying to fill in the spots that are vacant or can host new buildings, or we wish to recommend that. And I don't know how far it's gone since that committee passed on its work to the planning board and the zoning and the city council. But we did acknowledge under the category of infill that there are a number of properties that could host new construction.
And you could reasonably argue that the zoning amendments back in 2013 that were a result of the city center project was precisely that effort to promote infill, to lower the density requirements, to make the permitting process easier. And, you know, we do see some, but it's removing barriers in the regulations. And this is maybe more to the point of your question. These site plan regulations, though we don't talk about in the site plan regulations single-family or duplex development, because that's not subject to site plan review. But when we think about a development proposal, adding that minor review process with a technical review committee is an effort to streamline the permitting process, rather than having all proposals, even waiver requests, come to the planning board. We're identifying and more clearly defining. I think that's the other thing, is the transparency and clarity of the regulations are also very important. And, well, you know, I have some capacity to understand what's in the zoning ordinance only because I've been working with it for a number of years. Other people come in, and even, you know, the interim director at the Regional Planning Commission called me and asked for help because he had trouble reading the zoning ordinance. And he was a zoning director in Hanover for 15 years. So, you know, there's some things that need to be resolved and clarified. With the site plan regulations, the intent is to make it more clear when a permit's necessary and what kind of permit is necessary, and then also stating when a permit's not necessary, so that somebody doesn't have to look into the negative of a statement to find out whether or not they need it. Sort of, I try to think of this as a cookbook saying, if you have these ingredients, this is the type of permit you need, or not. So when we talk about any sort of development or any development opportunity that needs to have city review, and, you know, as we've been talking about, there are a lot of cases that need some eyes on it somehow. These site plan regulations are part of that process. And then when we get to enforcement and procedures, the bylaws or the site plan procedures or the planning board procedures are where we get into that, and we clarify that more. So I see some things that are missing in there that need to be added. And I don't think those have been updated for a good 15, 20 years. So we have a lot of opportunity here to clarify and improve. So right now we're focusing on the site plan regulations.
So, in just reading the RSA's pertinent to this, I just have some questions because I don't have any background on this as far as the technical review committee. According to the statute, it says the local legislative body of a municipality may, by ordinance or resolution, authorize the planning board to delegate its site review powers and duties in regard to minor site plans, which is what we're talking about here, to a committee of technically qualified administrators chosen by the planning board from the departments of Public Works, Engineering, Community Development, Planning, or other similar departments in the municipality. So my question is, what does the TRC currently look like? And was that a composition approved by the planning board?
It was. Essentially, in the September 19th memo, I explained that Ordinance 532, adopted May 8th of 2013 by City Council, established the TRC. And then the planning board...
What memo are you on? I'm sorry. Because I wasn't here at the last meeting.
Right.
so-
It's in the memo
in my-
from September 19th. Third bullet. Second bullet. So with that ordinance, we followed the RSA to establish the TRC. Once we get these site plan regulations in place, then we get to have a TRC and have a TRC that's functioning in the process. Right now, it's enabled, but we have nothing for them to do. That's where it stands right now. So with these site plan regulations and the provisions for minor site plan review, they would have something to do and a reason to meet.
So we had talked about that the technical review committee would have their own codes or rules to go by. Bylaws.
They would have some rules of procedure, and that's spelled out in here in specific cases. For example, if a waiver is requested, if they feel like the site plan board needs to review the case, they can review with condition, or no, sorry, they can approve a case.
So on page 9, you're
Yep, so it's, I'm
Yeah.
just seeing if they can approve with conditions. They cannot approve waivers. They can, at their discretion, refer an application to the planning board and determine whether the plan is considered a major. Yep, and they can condition approvals. And then that notice is shared with the planning board to let the planning board know what the TRC is up to.
Yep. I would like to think about, and again, I think I brought it up at our last meeting, that the decision of the TRC to approve the applicant's request is very appropriate. But rather than it just be a flat-out denial, that it would then be referred to the planning board. And so I guess I need some clarification of my understanding the difference in the roles between the TRC and the planning board. If an applicant request is reviewed by the TRC, and you don't grant approval because they haven't met all the conditions, and they're referred to, and it stops there, they're denied. And the applicant feels that they have every right to be heard. I understand they can appeal it. But I'm wondering if that's, in a way, a rude way of handling it, versus if you can't approve it, what if it's just referred to the planning board to be heard in public by the elected board, or in this case, appointed board, rather than by administrators? And there is a difference between how that looks when an applicant is being asked to be given approval for something. And I'm just thinking that if you can't approve it, then it shouldn't be just flat out denied. It should be referred, I believe, to the planning board.
May I
That's
read?
up to the discretion of the TRC.
Okay.
Well,
I would recommend that this process stay as presented.
So why
Have a
would,
definitive decision.
So if you deny it,
If it's denied, it can be appealed to the planning board.
okay?
Yep, that's what the statute says.
Yep.
This-
And in this case, it may be that the TRC in its review says, we just can't get to where we want to be, you know, and they might even opt to give the person a choice. We can refer you to the planning board, or we can deny it right now. What would you prefer? You know, that could be part of the discussion during the review. I don't know if it'll happen, but that is a
So,
possibility.
with
I
the
would, I would say, though, in terms of simplicity of procedure, I would keep this as it is.
Okay. And I'm not married to anything here, I'm just having the discussion. The conditions that you would deny an applicant from the TRC's perspective, would that be pretty much the same as the planning board denying an applicant?
Pretty much,
Okay,
yeah.
that's the question.
May I suggest something just for efficient use of everybody's time? This ordinance that you've presented with the changes references different statutes, but I don't know if the planning board members are familiar with those statutes, because some of the questions that are being asked right now are clarified in the statute. So I don't know how you want to do that, but I think it's very important if we're looking at ordinances and how to change them, to streamline the process and remove barriers that currently exist, that we also are familiar with the statute that it supports. And I don't know if that's what the committee members want to do, but it seems to me there may be, you know, information that is not well known by all of the, or equally known by the the board members, sorry.
So what's your suggestion?
I don't know, that would be up to the planning board as far as, I just think having the discussion without reading the supporting statute, we rob ourselves of the opportunity to have more robust discussion, or I can just read it.
It's short enough, isn't it? It's not,
It's-
it's only like a quarter of a page, isn't it?
It's yeah, about 2/3 of a column.
It's up to you guys.
Yeah, read it.
Well, I started reading part of it. The local legislative body may further stipulate that the committee members be residents of the municipality. This special site review committee, which we're calling a technical review committee, may have final authority to approve or disapprove site plans reviewed by it unless the local legislative body deems that final approval shall rest with the planning board, provided that the decision of the committee may be appealed to the full planning board so long as notice of appeal is filed within 20 days of the committee's decision. All provisions of RSA 676:4 shall apply to actions of the Special Site Review Committee, except that such a committee shall act to approve or disapprove within 60 days after submissions of applications, subject to extension or waivers provided in the statute. If a municipality authorizes a site review committee in accordance with this paragraph, the planning board shall adopt or amend its regulations specifying application, acceptance, and approval procedures, and defining what size and kind of site plans may be reviewed by the site review committee prior to authorizing the committee. The local legislative body of a municipality may by ordinance or resolution establish thresholds based on the size of a project or a tract below which site plan review shall not be required. If a municipality establishes a size limit below which site plan review shall not be required, the planning board shall adopt or amend its regulations to clearly reflect that threshold. Nothing in this paragraph shall preclude the planning board from establishing such thresholds in the absence of action by the legislative body. Site plan review shall not be required for a co-location or a modification of a personal wireless service facility, which is more than you need to know, or wanted to know. But that talks about your appeal process, and so I just wanted to make sure that everybody had the same information.
And there, they do have a or to the approval denial. So if you are going to, if the planning board wishes to require bylaws for the technical review committee, one of the bylaws that I would like to make sure are included would be that if there is a denial, that the applicant be informed that they can't appeal it to the planning board. Now, I'm not, you gotta be, I have to be clear here. The reason why I'm saying this is it's no reflection on who now could be members of the TRC, but it's who could be members in the future, and if there are any axes to grind or personality differences between applicant and people who are on the TRC. I'm trying to make sure that everyone's given a fair shot all the time. Because once this goes into law here, it's going to be in position for a long time. And we don't know who is going to be hearing who. And I always have a concern about writing a law that doesn't make sure that everyone's held to the same standards all the time with the same level of integrity. And that's my point.
I would agree with you, but that can't be done.
I know.
It can't.
I know.
It just can't be done. You can write any law you want. Somebody's going to find a way to circumvent it if they so choose.
I know. So we try to be as good as we can with it.
I think the word denial in there is fine, as long as they know they can appeal it.
Yep.
So you're saying no. You can use the word you want, no, denial, whatever you want to use. You're not going to pass what you need to do, and it has to go before the, if they want to do it, it has to go before the planning board. It's simple.
Right, and just so you folks know, I don't know if you've noticed this in any notice of decision, but there's a fairly hefty fine print paragraph at the end of every notice of decision. It's basically a discussion of right to appeal. And every notice of decision has that. And, if abutters come in and they're upset about a decision, I print out the legislation on appeals. Say, well, here's your opportunity if you feel like something went wrong. So, yeah, and I agree. Codifying that in bylaws, I think, is good to make it more accessible.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've got notes on that, and specifically about how the appeal process would work.
Thank you.
So if anybody has any substantial markups or red lines that, something that jumps out at you, you feel like needs to change, or even minor grammatical issues, I welcome those. Just pass them on, scan them, email them to me, that'd be fine. I'm finding stuff a lot, and it's, require versus requiring, or, it's just grammatical matching of tense. The pleasure of technical writing. So in this case, or if there's something or cross-reference that doesn't seem to match, or you have a question about whether this makes sense, please feel free. I think I'm going to take the next couple weeks and get a final draft for you folks to review. After you folks are okay with it, then we pass it on for legal review, then for adoption.
Great.
Is it possible, could you email a version, a clean version? Like, for example,
With no
some of
markups?
without the
Yeah.
markups, only
Yeah.
because in some of these that goes on quite a bit, and you go, all right, where did that sentence go to that
Where did that
sentence?
start,
Yeah, it
yeah.
just would be a little, to have them both.
I can distribute I'm going to still stamp it working draft,
Yeah.
black line. It's not without the line markups. We'll send it to the whole board.
Great, thank you.
So you guys have, and it might reveal those
Yeah, it's just easier
grammatical
to read
issues
that
much
way,
easier.
And then we can return it to you when text changes just to you, or do you want that?
If you feel it's substantial, let's present it to the board if it's grammar, or maybe a cross-reference. I'd say, anything that's more editorial, just pass it to me. I don't want to clutter up people's emails. And then it'll get transferred on to the full board.
I do have one more question. When Charlene read the statute concerning the TRC, it talked about that the planning board would be informed of the makeup of the TRC committee. And
No, planning board has the authority to state the composition.
yep. But that can't be, so for instance, if, when I've talked to Nancy about this, when we work on the city center project, we identified that it could be the DPW director or his designee.
Yes.
And the reason why the designee would be chosen is because the designee might have more information or knowledge about the applicant's request than the director of DPW itself. So the way the statute's written, it's kind of hard, and I would encourage you in your draft to us that indicate that it could be the designee.
Sure, yeah.
'Cause I
And
know
and
what-
I'll dig out a copy of the
Yep.
the ordinance as well, because I think that draws exactly from the
Sure.
statute.
When Nancy and I talked about it, we understood together that the TRC membership was put together with people who could answer the applicant's request. And not always could it be the same person from the DPW or the fire department or the police, but it could be a designee. And so that kind of flexibility is important, because then you're really providing all the information from the TRC's perspective.
Mhm. And so in this, and just to give you some sort of how it works in practice, there is an informal form of TRC going right now. It's called staff review.
Right.
It's an informal review process for an applicant. Say, North Country Smokehouse came in, this is our concept, you guys have any initial comments before we submit the site plan? And then, so that is very often, actually, I can't think of an occasion where a department head did not show up, maybe once or twice over the last couple of years. So the department heads typically attend. Something that's more formalized, like the TRC that we're talking about here, they might designate someone just to have consistency. But you're right, it will be a designee. I don't expect it to be different from case to case. I think it'll be the same person.
Can I make a comment?
Yep.
I'd like you to have it a little bit more, a qualified designee. So
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, yeah.
DPW director doesn't send up a truck driver? Or something like that happening.
Yep.
It's,
Gotta be somebody that's qualified to Picking on DPW tonight, I guess. But, I mean,
I don't know, I think Vic can drive a truck and look at a site plan pretty good.
I probably could.
Some of them might
And,
have common sense about it.
And a good active member of the zoning board is the superintendent of the Plainfield Highway Department, so we're not gonna knock no DPWs around here.
The sticking point where it's chosen by the planning board.
That was the easy one to pick, that's why.
This isn't going to happen.
Any other questions or
Chosen by the
comments?
planning board.
No heartburn over what we're talking about? Any other thoughts or questions? I try to close with an open question, just in case something comes to mind for someone. Usually comes from Marilyn, it's very insightful. No? I'm making up for the right hand.
All right, guess we'll move on then.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thanks.
Anything under new business?
No, sir.
And then any reports from boards and commissions? Okay. Any other correspondence?
Oh, we still have opportunity for registration, or did that get submitted?
I submit them as soon as
Okay.
as soon as I know someone wants
Okay.
to be registered.
So there has been interest, particularly from, I think, Vic, you're one, and a couple of zoning board members, to go to the New Hampshire Municipal Association Annual Conference.
Yeah. I'll be
It's
going.
mid-November, midweek in November, was it 14th?
16th and
16th
17th.
and
16th, 17th, thank you. So, and that's something that the city will cover the conference cost, but not the room, because it's a 2-day conference. You could go down for 1 day. We do have access to the schedule and the agenda. If anybody wants to go down there, you're encouraged to get up to speed on regulatory processes or any other topics that are covered. And there is a gala, because it's their 75th anniversary.
You have to
So
pay
you,
for
so you
that.
can get all dudded up on that one.
You have to pay for that.
You gotta pay your own fare on that one?
Yeah. It's $40.
Okay.
It's a banquet and gala after the first day.
Sounds snazzy. Bring your tails. Anybody else interested? We have some folks already
I'll
signed
be
up.
going.
So
I'm going.
you're going? DeForest is facilitating registration, so that's paid through the city, not individually, so reach out to
Mine's going
DeForest.
through the council anyway.
Yeah.
You're going through the
We're
council,
going
going
to
through
council
Dore?
reps, yeah.
Okay.
And mine's going through assessing.
Well, that's easy. I guess DeForest.
Unless you want to pay for it and I don't have to take it out of my budget, that would be good.
I'm taking enough out of your candy budget. Anyway,
Okay. Is that, anything else from anybody? Well, then I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned.
No.
thank you all very much.